Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Pfeiffer and I am an education coordinator at the Canadian Light Source. Today I have Cassy here who's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit about some of the connections she's made with some of the sciences and Synchrotron. But before she gets into that, I just want to mention, so Cassy's been working with us for a number of years, both as a mentor for some of our students on the Beamline programs and through some of the professional development opportunities as a speaker, which she'll talk more about at the end. So yeah, Cassy, if you could introduce and just share a little bit about you.
That sounds really good. Hi, my name is Cassy Appelt, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Saskatchewan in our College of Medicine. I study the evolution and development of animal faces, so why animals look different, how their teeth and jaws develop, and understanding how genetics that drive development help us understand how different faces and tooth shapes evolved in a relatively short period of time. As a scientist with experience in broad biology, archaeology, and health science aspects, I'm really excited about discussing synchrotron radiation applications to biology-based research. As someone with a vested interest in biology outreach and supporting inquiry projects in middle and high school age groups, I love discussing why the Canadian Light Source is an important research tool that students should absolutely experience and utilize in their biology courses. It can seem counterintuitive, but so much biology-based research can be actually investigated at the Canadian Light Source, and sometimes they can only be investigated at the Canadian Light Source. So I just wanted to take a second to kind of talk about where I see the Canadian Light Source and synchrotron radiation fitting into science curriculum at the middle and high school levels. Food security, plant life, and growth are topics that are touched on in science courses that transcend elementary, middle, and high school divisions. Questions that come to my mind that can be adapted in these grades for experiential or inquiry projects include things like, how do environmental contaminants affect the growth of our food crops? Can local industrial byproducts impact fruit and grain that crops produce? How about animal byproducts? Does contaminated groundwater from algae or duck population influence crops that students, at least in Saskatchewan, would be very familiar with because their families are often farmers? How do food crops interacting with other plants, how is that considered advantageous in partner gardening? How does this inform farming practices, traditionally that are monocrop culture in Canada and North America? How do minerals, elements, and components found in widely used fertilizers, pesticides, and fungicides impact how our food grows and develops? Can we detect changes in the food that's produced? How does this influence human nutrition and human health? Gardening and the food we eat. How does partner gardening change plant development? What impact do different fertilizers have on how well plants grow and the quality of food they produce? Do different pollinators provide any benefits to fruiting plants? How do invasive pests impact food growing in your garden? Are there plants or animals that could be important to environmental toxicity as remediators that can inform our farming and gardening processes and practices? Are these plants or animals effective remediators? How does growing them in tandem with our food create advantages for food plants, and how then does that transfer into human health considerations? Does industrial runoff influence or impact plant life? Does it provide a route for environmental toxins to accumulate and affect wildlife? Food and water security is touched on in grades 4 to 12 in science courses, and research questions can be adapted to fit specific outcomes and indicators in these different curricula. The study of the diversity of life can be adapted to several different topics and can fit into science course structures in most science levels. Diversity can be studied at several observational levels, like, for instance, taking a walk and looking at life in our surroundings. But it can also encompass research questions that aimed at metabolic differences between different plant or animal species, or experimental treatments that test different growth conditions. Just real quick, there we go. Invasive species. Questions that come to my mind include, how do microenvironments with high invasive species biodiversity differ from naturalized areas? Are these impacts noticeable in soil or water signatures? Can we investigate stressed and natural plants or animals in these areas? Or can we replicate them experimentally in the classroom? And of course, the health sciences becomes a focus in more senior science courses, but making links between science concepts and the world around us has always been an excellent inquiry-based teaching strategy. Questions that we can investigate in health science topics include things like, how do fundamentally different diets impact animal physiology? In extension to this, hair is a really great way to investigate health status, and it has links to health science and forensic sciences, and can include collecting samples from nature, from around our homes, from our pets or our animals, or things occurring on the farm. These are just a few research questions where I can see links in middle and high school science settings, but with a bit of prompting and intrigue, I can imagine the exciting research questions that students in these different grades could identify. We can investigate so many biology-based research questions using this brilliant source of light located right here in our backyards, and I hope to see more biology-related science questions coming from the education programs at the Canadian Light Source.
Cool. Okay. One thing I thought wanted to talk about your Asleep initiative a bit.
Perfect. So in addition to academics and being busy with a PhD full-time, I also took the initiative, I suppose, to create a science outreach group. I was really interested in providing science tools, demonstration tools, and opportunities for experiential and inquiry learning that students could do right in their small towns. About 50% of Saskatchewan's population is locked up in very small cities and towns, little groups, about 5,000 people or less, often less, and sometimes that just includes family farms as opposed to like a rural or urban-based center. So I was really interested in trying to get science to students so they didn't have to come to the city in order to experience science phenomena and explore it in really excellent inquiry projects. And so that was the dawning of the Asleep Initiative. And the Asleep Initiative stands for Accessible Scientific Learning and Education Equity Programming. It also has the dual advantage of being kind of a fun visual when we're discussing inquiry-based learning and experiential learning and getting involved in science. I liked the idea of equating inquiry and experiential-based learning to waking up and being excited and being involved and engaged in science, as opposed to just sitting down and learning based on definitions and writing out notes, which I think is also a very powerful way to learn, but can often be discouraging for students who learn in different ways. And inquiry-based education is a really valuable way to learn that often equates to better long-term learning and better internalization of knowledge. So most recently, I had the opportunity to disseminate one of the resource packages that I had created. It was a biodiversity resource package, and I presented it at the Summer Institute for Elementary Teachers, or the C.l.s. Conference that occurred, hosted at the Canadian Light Source earlier this year. I believe that was January or February 2020. And that was hosted by the Canadian Light Source, but put on by Ingenium. And during that session, I had the opportunity to take teachers through a flashcard-based game that I had developed and then also provided copies of that resource to them that was used to explore biodiversity. And I believe that fit into the framework of grades, I think, 1 to 12. And so we kind of went through the activity and how it could be applied to science courses in all of those very broad settings, and how they could be built upon within the context of the game for higher learning, including grade 10 to 12 science, but also in terms of fitting it kind of more broadly into those topics and how to build on them without just the game, and also including other content knowledge.
Cool. So if teachers, yeah, that is good. If teachers want to get a hold of you or get more info about a Sleep Initiative, where should they go?
Oh, well, you can find us on Facebook. We are the Asleep Initiative. I think our Facebook handle is just Asleep Initiative, one word. We're also on Instagram, and we do have an email address, a Gmail address, and I think I'll be able to provide the details for this video.
Cool. Thank you, Cassy.
Thank you.